This episode is brought to you by Ursa Minor Outfitters. Folks, I'm absolutely in love with my loon mug. It's handmade, it's an absolute piece of art. Whether it's at the office or at the house, people keep asking to check it out. If you're not a loon fan, they also have other beautiful mugs for wildlife fans of moose, bears, and eagles. They specialize in products highlighting the outdoors and local pride through quality design by local artists. They've even started expanding into items beyond mugs, like apparel, dog accessories, and soon candles and more. They also try to partner and highlight other small businesses, and in some cases, forego profits in lieu of charitable giving to help their community, such as the dog rescue. So check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for our four-legged hiking partners, they also have a portable silicone dog bowl and also a sweet over-the-collar dog bandana. Go check them out, UrsaMinorOutfitters.com, and don't forget to enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. Welcome, everyone, to the Hikes and Mikes podcast. I'm your host, Ivan, and together we'll embark on a weekly journey connecting with extraordinary hikers from all corners of the U.S. and beyond. As the cool and colorful embrace of fall envelops the Northern Hemisphere, we've had the privilege of conversing with remarkable individuals throughout this season. Their experiences and adventures will leave you yearning to hit the trails. And in today's episode, we're heading to the great state of Michigan to speak with our guest, Anthony, about his beautiful state in the Great Lakes region. You can follow Anthony on Instagram at Anthony in Parks. He shares with us some of the amazing outdoor opportunities in and around Michigan, from lakeshore hikes to beautiful fall colors and even sand dunes. Michigan is sure to have an outdoor opportunity for everyone. Anthony also shares with us about a unique water activity he's been able to participate in deep below Lake Michigan. Without further ado, let's jump into this episode with our guest, Anthony. Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of the Hikes and Mikes podcast. My name is Ivan, and we'll be talking to Anthony from Michigan today. I'm excited to talk to him about what it's like hiking in and around the Great Lakes, especially Michigan. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. You know, we always like to start off by asking our guests how long they've been hiking for and how they got started.
Definitely, thank you so much for having me on. I've been following along, listening to some episodes in your Instagram channels for a little bit, and I'm excited to be here. So yeah, I've been hiking quite honestly my whole life. So I grew up in a small town called Coldwater, so it's near the Indiana border. Lots of trees, lots of trails, lots of lakes in the area. And so as a child, it was very formative for me to be outside. And so, you know, definitely one of those households where in the summertime, we weren't allowed to be on technology or in front of the TV. It was go outside, find your friends, find your neighbors, get out and get active. And I think that from a very young age, I was very fortunate and very privileged to be instilled with that sense of a love of nature, and it's just carried with me through my whole life. And I had the chance to move to Louisiana for a couple years and hike and be outdoors down there, and the bayou is a lot different, and the parks down and near Baton Rouge in Mississippi, and then up through Wisconsin, and now I'm back home in Michigan. So it's definitely something I love.
And how would you describe the hiking scene in and around your current neck of the woods?
So I currently live in West Michigan, and you have quite the mix over here. So you have some traditional, what you might find, just rocky path, wooden path, roots, things of that nature. There's a lot of trees. The Midwest, for those listening, is a gigantic forest. But West Michigan's unique because we are on the edge of Lake Michigan. So we have a lot of sand dunes in the area. And so when you think about it, sometimes the mental image in your head and what you see on a postcard is the big sandy dune right there. And those exist. But the truth is that to keep those from eroding away, a lot of trees and forests are planted along them. So when you hike through, it's a lot softer. It's not as hard on your knees or your legs, but it is a lot of elevation changes up and down and up and down. And so very gorgeous, very beautiful, because your hike can take you through a very nice wooded area. And the end of it, typically in my neck of the woods, takes you right to Lake Michigan. So you always have that very scenic view to wrap things up and turn around at.
That's great. Yeah, it's always good to finish by the water on a hike, especially on a hot summer day. I got to ask, with such diversity there in West Michigan, with the sand dunes, the lakeshore, and the forest, what are some of your favorite hikes and trails in and around West Michigan?
So it's interesting because of the nature of the trails that we have here. You get a lot of really cool topography changes as you go through. You can kind of walk through some of those classic Midwest ferries into tall pines and then find yourself on a sandy beach. So in West Michigan, we have, it's called Rosie Mound, which is a very classic. If you find yourself over here in kind of the Holland, Grand Haven, Saugatuck area, that's one of the icons of hiking in West Michigan. There's another one that I really enjoy called Riley Trails, and that's inland away from the lake. But again, I love it because of all the changes and where you can find yourself within a 2-mile loop or even a mile loop. So if you're going to visit, travel up the state, and very popular over here, M22 will take you straight up to Sleeping Bear Dunes, and that'll take you into the Upper Peninsula. And if you find yourself in the UP, Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore is a must-see, and it's very big, so it's hard to miss it, and it encompasses quite a stretch up there along Lake Superior.
One thing that I'm starting to learn, especially this year, is that not just Michigan, but Wisconsin, Minnesota, they are an underrated gem for fall hikes and fall colors. How is the fall hiking season in your neck of the woods right now?
Well, if you go on Instagram, everybody I like Instagram, but I don't have a drone, so I think my profile can only take me so far. So I watch everybody else's content. It's beautiful. I mean, it's really, really just gorgeous. I would say that fall hiking in the Great Lakes region, I mean, you could compare it to the Northeast. You could compare it out to Colorado, really just anywhere with a large tree canopy around it. We don't have quite the spooky theme that you get in the Northeast. The Halloween is a much bigger element, which I really like. October is my second favorite month outside of July, but I mean, it's beautiful. The weather is pretty nice around here. You kind of mild temperatures, get through lots of gorgeous colors, very picturesque. So I actually did a training recently heading up to northern Michigan, and then just driving along the highway, even you kind of get that dose of it. So if you're coming for fall colors, I would say that mid-October is about the best time to visit. Usually early September to mid-October, but you'd have to go all the way up to the Upper Peninsula to get their peak colors. Down in the Lower Peninsula, we tend to peak a little bit later, but try to get here before November, because the way the weather works, by the time November rolls around, it's nice. We get a big rain and then it's all gone. So that would be my advice for anybody coming, but it is on par with anything else you might see out there in the country.
Yeah. The one thing I've noticed over the years, and especially this year when they closed down the farm in the Northeast, you get the crowds in the Northeast, and deservingly so because of just the vastness and the colors, but you can get the same thing in and around the Great Lakes region with hardly the same amount of crowds that you would in the Northeast.
Yeah, we're fortunate with that. I would say, Michigan's kind of an interesting place because there's a lot of push for tourism, right? In pure Michigan, it's always existed, but we are getting a lot of good press. We have gorgeous amenities. Both upper and lower peninsulas are surrounded by Great Lakes. And so you're never fewer than 6 miles from a body of water in the state. If it's a river, a pond, a lake, a trail, or one of the Great Lakes is always nearby too. So we're seeing more visitors, definitely, especially in West Michigan, seeing a lot more out-of-state plates, which is fantastic. But we're seeing a lot of new residents as well. So I work professionally in the parks and recreation industry. And so I say it's parks and recreation at the intersection of personal is professional, and has how I view everything I do, because I'm an avid user of the spaces that I work in. And quite a few people from out of state are moving to West Michigan as well. And so a lot of them, if you ask, they'll say, I visited and I wanted to stay and a job opened up. So that's really cool to see as well too. But I would say we're not quite at the level of some of those other areas where they have to start closing things, or having ticketing or access or things of that nature. But an increase in tourism, definitely. But hopefully, there's enough to go around for everybody that we never get that way. Because you're right, we don't want to damage the natural landscape or cause any issue, and, leave no trace principles when you visit, kind of thing, right?
Definitely. And we talked about this with the large amount of lakeshore that you guys have on both sides of your state. What are some of your favorite lakeshore hikes?
So again, going back to Rosie Mound, Really, if you travel up the west coast of Michigan, and for anybody listening that's on the east coast, the Lake Huron side, I apologize. I haven't been over there as much, but just traveling up the west coast of Michigan, you're going to get a lot of those classic sand dune hikes. And so you really can't go wrong by the time you start at the Indiana State Dunes, and then work up the lake shore all the way up to Sleeping Bear and take yourself towards Mackinac Island and the bridge. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit different, that is still just as iconic, Turnip Rock is actually in the thumb of Michigan. So that is on the east side. And that's one that you have to kayak out to. Not a long kayak, but just a quick shore kayak to get there. And so that you will see on a lot of posters. You'll see on a lot of postcards, Instagram posts. It's probably one of the most iconic landmarks we have. So definitely come. You can't go wrong with any small town along Lake Michigan. And you're going to get just sandy beaches and hiking trails, state-owned, national-owned, local-owned, Saugatuck, Grand Haven, Leland, all the way up there, Petoskey. But if you want to go a little bit further and visit Detroit along the way, check out Turnip Rock. If you want to get to the UP, check out the Pictured Rocks Lakeshore that's up there as well. And don't skip Mackinac Island on the way.
I was going to ask you about that. So here in Washington State, our smallest state park is a little island in Puget Sound that you have to kayak. That's the only way you can access the state park. And you mentioned the one that you have to kayak out to. Are there any other trails that require a kayak or a boat in order to access?
That's a good question. I'm sure there are. I know that, so Mackinac Island, you have to take a ferry to, so that would probably count. Some very gorgeous hiking around Mackinac Island. I was actually just up there a few weeks ago. Beaver Island is another one that you have to take a boat to. Isle Royal, I think you actually have to take a seaplane to get into, and that's a national park. There's just so much. Honestly, it's when I lived in Louisiana, they called it a sportsman's paradise down there, and I could really see why. And when you think about the outdoor recreation industry, and especially on social media, a lot of times it's out west, right? It's the national parks, it's the trails, it's a bunch of the stuff that's out there. And I think weather permitting, it is a little bit easier because you can kind of year-round hike when you head out in that direction. But if you're looking to, kayak, if you're looking to take a boat, if you're looking for any of those things, Michigan just has it. I'm not struggling because I think there's a lack of it. I'm more so struggling to think, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's one of those things you don't always know off the top of your head because a quick Google search will give you so many results. It's not information that you need to be able to just snap with, right? So in my neighborhood alone, to get to Grand Haven State Park, I could drive there, right? Get on the highway and drive 30, 40 minutes depending. Or I could go right up to the river, plop my kayak in, and take the Grand River Greenway all the way to that state park.
No kidding.
Yeah, dump me right out in Lake Michigan. It's so cool. So it's everywhere around here.
Yeah, that's a great way to start the hike is by kayaking in.
Yeah, so I would love to, we've talked about maybe next year for the summer solstice, my partner and I doing that, longest day of the year, just kayak straight out there and then camp overnight or something. So it'd be really fun.
And I know, we've been talking about the lake and lakeshore, but inland Michigan must have some amazing hikes in and around the forested areas, right?
Yeah. So again, lots of state parks. A fantastic state park system complemented by county parks, complemented by local parks. Just the opportunity everywhere to right out your back door. Even here, where I live, we have a small little community park that follows a creek, right? You can follow the creek trail. In my neighborhood around Grand Rapids really isn't that big. And so it's one of those things where when I was growing up in Coldwater, it was just out there, or you knew people that lived more out in the country, owned a piece of land. The state is just built for outdoor recreation. I would say it is a premier state in that aspect. And sometimes I believe that the reason it hasn't, if you knew, you knew. If you're from here, you knew. You're from kind of the Great Lakes region, you knew. But maybe if you weren't from around the rest of the country, it didn't make as much sense. But it's just the culture of Michigan, kind of that Midwest, not to really brag a lot, very much like a blue collar state. Honestly, a lot of industry, for a Rust Belt state. So people were very proud of what they had. Keep your head down, do your job, go home, your family, your values, things of that nature. And so I think that for a long time, that's why you didn't quite always hear about people coming here, or the tourism industry needed the pure Michigan push to really get the word out. And so there's just so much of it. because it's everywhere. And so, there's a trail that runs through here too. And you have to correct me. I always get my trails mixed up. North Country, that's what it is. The North Country Trail runs through Michigan. So it comes through, I think, Pennsylvania, New York State. I'm sure anybody that knows will, in the comments, will tell us we're wrong. But Pennsylvania, New York State must go through Ohio, up through Michigan to the Upper Peninsula, Wisconsin, and I think it ends somewhere over in Minnesota potentially. But then there's a national trail right there. And all along that trail, you've got state parks, local trails, everything that goes into it.
This year especially, I have discovered what type of gem the Great Lakes region is when it comes to not just hiking, but outdoor activities in general. From Minnesota to Wisconsin, one place that keeps popping up in my feed and when I talk to people is the Ice Age Trail.
Yeah.
And in Michigan, it's just hundreds of miles of lakeshore, state parks, trails, and there's really not a bad place in that region. If you're looking for an outdoor experience, you'll definitely find it.
Yeah.
Now,
and around Detroit, they're building the Joe Louis Greenway. So a lot of major urban areas are starting to convert old railroads into trails around the city and seeing a lot of economic development pop up around those. I know Atlanta is in the process of working on a big one, and Detroit's going to have a really large one too. So more reason to revisit the Motor City or visit if you've never been there.
I wonder if that's connected to... So we have a similar trail system that's, I think they finally finished it. It's called the Cascades to Palouse Trail. And it used to be an old railroad line that I think went all the way to Chicago. And I think that's the goal, is to have each state complete that section of trail to possibly lead all the way to Chicago.
I could definitely see that. I know here we have another trail system on the southwest side that takes you from southwest Michigan. You could ride a bike, hike, run, walk down to Chicago as well. They're working on, and then a trail system connecting Grand Rapids to Lake Michigan. So Grand Rapids, for those that don't know, I lived in Milwaukee in the same way that Milwaukee was kind of a smaller Chicago in terms of what you think of like the elements, that classic Great Lakes Midwest city, Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Detroit. Grand Rapids is a smaller Milwaukee. The only difference is that how all of those cities are on the Great Lakes, Grand Rapids is set back in on the river, and then you have to travel to get out to the lakes. And so you have all the coastal resort towns out there. But interestingly, when I lived in Milwaukee, you're on Lake Michigan, but the accessibility to it is a lot different. It's at the coastline there, the beaches are smaller, it's a lot rockier. The city takes up a lot of space on it. There's one beach, there is a Lakeshore State Park is down there, and another Veterans Park as well. But when you walk along the lake, it's metal seawall, so it doesn't really have access. So you see it every day. You kind of take it for granted. It becomes part of the backdrop, right? In West Michigan, I feel so much more connected to Lake Michigan just because it's so much more accessible. There's beaches everywhere. There's state parks, local parks, municipal parks, and there's, I think there's a state law here that allows in some capacity, like you can't fully privatize your beachfront. So you can, the citizens can walk, and I think, there's elements to that. I don't know exactly, but just I feel a lot more connected, and I'm like, wow, I'm actually out on the lake a lot more when I lived, less than a mile from it previously. But the different, there's a lot of houses there, you didn't really see it, so it's kind of cool. So if you're looking for a place to check out and you like those cities, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, definitely check out Grand Rapids. It's a really cool spot.
Thanks for sharing that tip, Anthony.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, do I work for the tourism industry? But I mean, I love it here. We're talking about hiking. It's a hiker's paradise, honestly. There's so much cool stuff here.
Now, Anthony, we've been talking about the fall and the fall colors, but with fall, that means winter's not too far behind. What's the winter hiking scene like? And is there any special precautions that you take when you do hit the trails?
So snowshoes are big. Snowshoes are a big one. Usually around here at Costco, Walmart. We have a place called Meijer. It's kind of a local Walmart, local Target. Any kind of store like that, you might want to go check it out and pick them up. Or in the city of Grand Rapids, I know a lot of places too, they'll do rentals. I think even the state parks and local parks at their warming houses have rentals. But it's just a good general idea to take snowshoes with you. We get a lot of what's called lake effect snow. So it's really kind of wet, heavy snow that falls and really piles up. And it can snow for days here. I mean, I came home for the holidays a couple of years ago, and I was home for a week, and every single day I was out there brushing, an inch or two of snow off my car. just goes and goes and goes. But the nice thing is that we're equipped for it, right? We've been dealing with it for a long time. So even that huge blizzard that we had last year that dropped more snow than some infamous 70s blizzard that shut the whole place down, I mean, you could get out and get to the store. The roads are cleared. So, but in terms of hiking, winter sports, definitely dress in layers. A good time to layer up with a good, nice, warm, wool. I really like wool. Synthetic is good too. I like wool just because of how it breathes. But dressing in layers, obviously the core principles of staying hydrated. Sunscreen, because of the snow, it does reflect. You can get sunburns, so sunglasses as well. Snowshoes, if you don't have them, there are paved trails, or not paved, but groomed trails, I should say. And then a lot of times, like a lot of people are outdoors anyways, so you'll get a lot of good snowpack, good pair of boots, good pair of gloves. In the Midwest, you either need your light jacket or your big jacket, depending on what it looks like outside. But yeah, it's really just about, I would say, staying warm and making sure that you have the right, if you take snowshoes, if you need them, stay hydrated. But other than that, it's kind of a lot of the classic things that you would go out just on a normal day hiking as well.
And one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is learning of not just the outdoors, but of the people that have become synonymous with the outdoors, and learning about the history of the national parks, about the park system. And one thing that I learned from your feed, Anthony, was that John Muir, who, is synonymous with the national park system, was raised in Wisconsin, and his childhood home throughout his teenage years is there in Wisconsin. And you got a chance to visit his childhood home. Can you share a little bit about that experience, and if people want to visit, what they could expect?
Yeah, so I didn't know that when I moved there, and I wound up learning that. And then I learned that it's actually a part of the Ice Age Trail runs through it, which is really cool. But his homestead is it's in rural Wisconsin. And so I think it's currently it's managed by one of the counties up there. So it's not even a national park in and itself, with how much he is tied to the history of the national parks. It's really cool to go see. So they have some information about him, information about his life, information about like how he got there, and you can walk around, and it is all just natural. So the house itself isn't there, but they tell you where the location was on the land. But the big thing is that there's a trail that goes around the lake that was on the property. And to walk that trail in the same place that he walked, and kind of experience the things that he would have experienced at the time, and see and how it impacts you, and knowing that that is something that's so influential in the history of this individual, who then had an impact on the history of our national parks. I think it's really, really cool to see. It's just, you kind of get the sense of why it was inspirational and formative towards them. And you can kind of feel that sense, how it is in you. And I took my feelings from that day to apply to the work that I do, and the things that I take with me when I go hiking as well. So I don't necessarily want to use the word pilgrimage in any sense like that, but it's an interesting way to see how somebody who has had such an impact, and how nature and their body of nature they experience had an influence on them as well too. It's a little bit north of Madison, I want to say. So if you were planning on visiting, you'd probably want to land somewhere in Madison and then head up to it. That would be the metro area to go check it out. And again, it's a county park. So it's off a county road. It's just out there because it was a farm, it was a homestead. It was a very rural upbringing. And for anybody that's into podcasts, which I know that you are, but the Stuff You Should Know podcast has a good episode on him. And it kind of goes into all the things about his life in Wisconsin, how it was impactful towards him, and how he transferred that into helping, the founding of the national parks. But then it also, as individuals from a past era, it dives into some of the things as well that maybe they had challenges with, or that we would want to acknowledge in the ways that he was great here, but he wasn't so great here. So I don't really want to talk too much on that, but that's a good resource for anybody that wants to learn more there too. And obviously John Muir, influential, the indigenous population in Wisconsin as well too. So acknowledging that they also were in that land prior and on it, I should say. And obviously their impact is felt when you visit that space also, and you can kind of see the history of everything with it there.
Yeah, definitely. If people want to learn more about the individual that is John Muir, check out that podcast, and we can link it in the episode show notes for people to check out.
And definitely take a visit, because it is cool to see. And Madison's not far. Madison's a really hip town. So if you're looking for a hip college town, A lot of cool stuff. It's worth a trip. You can make a long weekend out of it.
Now, you've mentioned it already, Anthony, but another unique place that's found in Michigan is Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which, it's not surprising. Maybe it's the algorithm, but for like the last 2 weeks, I've seen that giant sand dune that people are hiking down or running down, and how you should be prepared if you make it down to the lakeshore that it could take you 2 to 3 hours to climb back out of it. How would you describe Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and what's been your experience visiting those dunes?
So I'll also add to that if you have to get rescued, it is a $3,000 fine. So, it's beautiful. Quite honestly, it's one of the best views of Lake Michigan, I would say, in the state. And it's along M22, which is a historic highway with, again, a lot of historic resort areas, a lot of sand dunes, a lot of scenic overlooks that'll take you up Michigan's west coast. And it's probably the premier destination on that trip outside of the cities that you might visit. So the lakeshore itself, when you get there, you drive through. It's a very gorgeous, high tree canopy, National Lakeshore, National Park, wooded drive, especially in the fall, beautiful time to go. Summer is gorgeous if you like it green and sunny. And then if you head through in the fall right now, this kind of makes me want to jump in my car and head up because it's only like a few hours away. But you get there and then you get out and you walk up and it is just breathtaking views. And I mentioned earlier about living in Milwaukee and taking for granted Lake Michigan when it is such a constant backdrop that's just something you see every day. And so that's one of the things I love about being on the west coast of Michigan is that driving to the lake and having those sandy beaches and that beautiful blue water, you look out and you're just like, wow, we're in the Midwest. You know what I mean? Like it's a trend on social media. This isn't the Caribbean. This isn't, the ocean or whatever. But for all intents and purposes, people, when you say lake, people might think small lake, inland lake, surrounded by whatever. But the Great Lakes are the size of, it's a sea. It's just not salt water. So that's why it's called a lake. And Lake Superior, it's one of the largest, deepest bodies of fresh water. It's massive. You can't see across it. And so being at the top of Sleeping Bear Dunes, and you can see out and all the sand dunes, and you can see for miles, and it's glistening and it's beautiful. And I've been there so many times, and they've got it really organized and worked out so that it's not too crowded when you're there. Even at peak times, like it's so vast and there's so much of it that every view is good. And so the dune itself is massive. And when you get to the top of it, you kind of take a look out, and then it's like kind of like being on like climbing a mountain. Honestly, the sand dunes, they're very, very tall. And then I believe that Sleeping Bear itself is not actually the one that you're on top of, but it's off in the distance, and it looks like a bear that's sleeping, and that's where it gets its name.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's something that it's kind of like, because there's pockets of islands out there as well too, and so I forget the exact name of the exact dune that you're on. But it's one of those things where everybody in Michigan just references. If you say you're going to Sleeping Bear, they know what you're talking about, and they know where you're going to be standing and what you're looking at. And so you could just take it as that. So, but yeah, to go down it, the dunes themselves. So Sleeping Bear's in the distance. Sleeping Bear Dunes is the whole system of it. Yeah, it could take you about maybe 20 minutes to get to the bottom. Some people you see them, they go running down there. And then you just sit there and you kind of watch, and like you see when they're really happy, they have a lot of fun, they're taking their pictures. Then they start coming up, and it's a lot of stopping, hands on hips, a lot of crawling on your hands and knees. And even really, fit people struggle with it. And so if you are an individual who loves to hike, the mountains, or, do summit style hiking and up and down, I would say it's worth it as a personal challenge, because hiking on sand dunes is a lot different than hiking on firm ground. Every step forward is a couple inch slide back. It's really different with your legs, and like it's rocky. The sand itself is the soft sand that you think at a beach has kind of been pushed to the side because of how many people have gone up and down. So it is a little bit rockier. And so if you're going barefoot, You got to be prepared for that. And if you're wearing shoes, they're going to get full of sand too. So, but it's cool. And I know some people that have gone every year and they go down and they come up, and then you got people like me who I'm good with the view. You know what I mean? I can watch. I don't need to prove it to me, but if you want to prove it to yourself, by all means, come join us.
We've been talking about water, Anthony, and here in the Pacific Northwest, we have, some great glacial alpine lakes that never get warm, not even on the hottest day of the summer. How is the Great Lakes water temperature in the summer? Like, can you actively swim in the Great Lakes, or is it pretty cold throughout the year?
No, you can actively swim in the summer. So Lake Superior is the biggest, and it stays pretty chilly. I mean, you're thinking probably like 60s, maybe even into the 50s. Lake Michigan itself, last summer, not this past summer, but last year, summer of 22, I don't know what was happening, but that lake on our side was in the 70s every day.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And this summer, it was closer to being in the 60s every day. And so, if you're closer to shore or a really hot day, it feels good. But I remember I jumped off a boat into the lake one day and I froze up. I was like, oh, I'm feeling I'm getting a little too old for it now. So it's brisk, but it's not uncomfortable. You can, and the water turns. So if you're planning on visit or somebody comes to Michigan, you have to check the wave report. That's a big one. Is Lake Michigan, the Great Lakes are serious, so check the wave report because they'll have flags up. And I know some individuals might think that they're a great swimmer, think that they could handle it, but unfortunately, every year there's individuals who brave the lake when they shouldn't be, and unfortunately, it doesn't turn out. And so check the wave report, check the conditions, and check the temperature before you go, and know that it can change daily. Honestly, that's the thing about it. It could be beautiful, maybe 70 degrees one day. A storm could come through, the lake could turn over, and that cold water could come up and come across, and then it's down into the 50s. So that's just kind of the reality of it. But, Wisconsin side, Michigan side, every summer I've had the opportunity to go swimming in Lake Michigan. Swam in Lake Superior, and again, it's just, it's going to be cold, but it gets hot. And honestly, that's one of the things about our state is that, we're a climate oasis because of the Great Lakes. And so, I was reading this summer about wet bulb temperatures and these terrible heat waves and a lot of the really hard parts of what's occurring with climate change. And I would say that we had a very moderate summer, a little bit cooler this summer, honestly, than last year. And so that impacted why the lake itself was cooler, where last year it was a bit hotter, just warmer days, and the lake itself warmed up too. So it's something that it's there and you can swim in it, which is nice. It's when you're on it, all the things that you can do on an inland lake, anywhere that any listener that would think in their head, boating, fishing, kayaking, all those things, you can treat Lake Michigan like that. And that's really, really cool. All the Great Lakes, honestly.
Talking about water, Anthony, one of our favorite segments here on the podcast is doing a deep dive in our guest's Instagram, picking out a few pictures or maybe a picture that kind of captures our attention. And the ones that captured my attention was it looked like you were diving in the Great Lakes. Can you share a little bit about that experience and what it's like?
Yeah, so the Great Lakes actually have world-class shipwreck diving. And so it's a lot like going into outer space. So I've been diving before down in the Caribbean and around Cozumel, and the beautiful, it's serene, it's warm, it's clear, you can see forever in the tropical fish, and you're kind of like swimming through an aquarium. The Great Lakes, it can be a little bit more ominous, honestly, but it's a really, really a cool experience. And so, some of the wrecks are less than 100 feet and some of them are 200-300 feet down. You've got classic wooden schooners that look like the old vintage pirate ships. You've got modern, tugboats and Lake Michigan freighters and all these things all around the lake. And so it's a challenge because the water is colder. It is darker, so the visibility is a little bit less. And so you have to have specific training for it. So if you were to travel to dive Lake Michigan, you wouldn't want it to be one of your very first dives, but it's definitely a destination to think, well, I want to go dive a coral reef. Well, come dive a shipwreck in the Great Lakes. It's really, really cool. And fortunately for me and a lot of my friends who learned to dive around Lake Michigan, I think that it produced us as a level level of divers so that when we go to, say, Cozumel, when it's warm and easy and clear, I'm like, oh, this is so much fun. I just need a rash guard in my tank, like
Yeah.
that's it. I don't need like this dry suit and this space suit and everything. But it's funny too though, because it is weightlessness with diving, and so when you're going into the Great Lakes, it's a lot of gear and it's a lot of stuff, and you look kind of goofy with everything you've got on. But then you get underwater and you're floating, you're buoyant, and all that heavy stuff doesn't really weigh you down as much, so to speak. So it's really cool. I like it a lot. I'd say anybody that's interested, you could follow, like, I want to say Underwater Connection is one out of Wisconsin, their Instagram. If you want to just kind of like, I think Jason Heaton, he is a author out of Minneapolis. He grew up in Milwaukee. He talks a lot about scuba diving, kind of adventure lifestyle, big into wristwatches for anybody that's into wristwatches too. But he dives in Lake Michigan a lot and he'll share pictures of it. So those are a couple accounts just to kind of get a baseline of what it's actually like here. But I'd recommend it, and it's really fun. It's really, really cool just to go around all the shipwrecks and even the inland lakes. So this summer I went to a couple inland lakes, and the dive shops will just, like, one of them sank like a submarine and like an airplane and like a schooner and put some cannons on it. We really make sure that we can embrace the hobby, even though we're not anywhere that has year-round diving like Florida or California or the tropics.
For listeners, please check out Anthony's Instagram, because he has a couple pictures where he's at the helm of some of these sunken ships. The one that really caught my attention, Anthony, is you're going through, I'm not sure what type of plant it was, but there's a little turtle hanging on this aquatic plant.
Oh, yeah.
Quarter of the picture. And if you're not paying attention, the turtle kind of blends in, but then once you spot it, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, listeners, please go check out Anthony's Instagram and see some of those pictures. Now, Anthony, a lot of day hikers have regular routines that they do on hikes, whether it's packing a favorite snack or beverage, maybe a moment of zen up at the top of their summit, or maybe it's grabbing some particular food on the way out. Is there any regular routines that you do when you reach your final destination, or maybe when you make it back out?
My partner and I, we like to get an avocado toast before we go. So we have a local coffee shop, swing through, get an avocado toast, and that'll be fuel for the day, right? Some good fat, some good carbs, just delicious all around. And that usually just kind of puts us in the mood to get going. But in terms of real rituals outside of that, I try to be really, really mindful. You know what I mean? There's the term forest bathing, which is really moving slow and really being mindful. And I know there's more to it than what I'm describing, but, I just kind of think of those concepts and being present and, just you're in that space and you're not there for very long. There's even memes and jokes about hiking or driving multiple hours to hike 30 minutes to see something and then turning around. So I think a good hearty meal to kick you off, something fun, something that I don't eat every day. I don't get avocado toast often unless I'm doing this, and then just the mindfulness of the experience. And then if it's camping, I always like a big steak after a good hike. Not gonna lie. But if it's drive in, drive out, then after a good long hike, a nice afternoon in the hammock sounds pretty good. And then maybe grilling a steak, who knows, so
I like those. Yeah. Seeing my friend Sarah bring her hammock on a couple of the hikes, and just being able to set up a hammock and take a load off, even if it's 30 minutes off the summit, is something else. Now, talking about specific items, Anthony, one thing I always like to ask our guests is, outside of the essential items that you do pack, is there any luxury items that you tend to take frequently on your trips or on your hikes that kind of fall outside of the essentials?
I will admit that I'm a tent camper, and I usually camp in places where I can go. I haven't done any backpacking or whatever, so it's like stationary camping, hiking in an air mattress. I'm not rough and rugged. I gotta have the air mattress for the night sleeping. In terms of the hike itself, I think that I think that you should always have a pocket knife on you, but my luxury item would be the Leatherman Signal. And
Yes.
so it's just like it's a Leatherman tool they built for the outdoors, and it has a whistle and a ferro rod and a saw and a knife with a straight and a serrated blade on it. And this past summer I got really into kind of bushcraft, and so it's cool because it's just nice having a tool to enhance your hike where it has a whistle. So if like you get lost or something, it's right there. You don't have to carry anything extra. I got into finding. Do you know what fatwood is? So
No.
pine trees. So pine trees will, if they're dead or fallen or whatever, and you go up and there's little small branches on it, if you cut that branch off, there'll be a lot of the sap still inside of that wood. And so then you strip it away around the edge, and then it's really good for fire starting. And so some people sell it, you make like shavings with it or chop it up or whatever, but the sap just acts as a fire extender, right? It's like kind of like a petroleum, like a chapstick or something that you could add to a cotton swab if you're into starting fires in a more traditional way without a lighter, or if you do use a lighter as well. So, but just having something, I'm like, oh, there's a fallen pine tree, I can check and see if it might have some fat wood on it and just, take a piece of that for the campfire later, stuff like that. And so I think that just having that nice multi-tool that allows you to do a ton of things that I can just clip on, my backpack, we're good to go. And I will say that I am a camelback person. I do love, I don't like carrying a water bottle with me, so I just do the whole camelback thing as well too. And I know that I just talked about using a tool to take something from the forest. So be mindful if you are looking into, learning more about foraging or bushcraft or all these other things that, that's an element of it when you hike, is that like, oh, I want to go find fat wood. Where's like the right place to take fat wood from? You shouldn't be cutting from live trees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just something that's dead. But I just wanted to throw that in there so no one's like, he told me to chop down a tree. And I'm like, no, that's not what
Yeah. Now, Anthony, you're a fellow podcaster. Can you share a little bit about your podcast and the subject matter that you cover on yours?
Yeah, so my podcast is called Shore to Shore. It's through the Michigan Recreation and Park Association, and we talk with park and rec professionals. So if you think of your local town, city, municipality you live in, or individuals even at your state DNR, and some of the national parks and lakeshores as well, we have conversations with them just about the program they're running, the parks they manage, things of that nature. But we also have conversations with park users in a format similar to this. So individuals who just are experiencing the parks and the outdoors in Michigan, and we want to know their side of things also. So it's a cool podcast. If you're in the professional side of things, really anywhere in the outdoor recreation industry, if you're on the professional side of things, give it a listen. Or, if you just want to kind of go through and hear from people or individuals that are more in this format of just somebody that likes to be outdoors, then there's episodes for that too. So you can find it anywhere you can find podcasts. We're all over the place with it. So
Right on. And we'll be sure to add it to the episode show notes so people can check it out, especially if you're thinking about visiting the Great Lakes area in 2024. Be sure to listen to some of those episodes that Anthony is publishing. Now, we're at the end of 2023, Anthony, and 2024 is just right around the corner. Do you have any upcoming hiking goals for the new year?
Yeah, so I do want to get more into backpacking. I do want to do the trail that we talked about earlier. It goes through a lot of state parks, and you can hike in, and then they have campsites set aside, and then hike back out. So I want to get more into backpacking. I bought a kayak this summer. I really want to do a longer kayaking trip again, would just kayak down the river, hop out, camp, and keep going. Would love to expand my bushcraft skills and learn more about just nature and outdoors. I don't know if anybody watches the show Alone, but we had a guy from West Michigan who won the second season. He was up on Vancouver Island for 60, 70 days, and then obviously, I don't know. I mean, like Naked and Afraid's funny, but I think some days it's like more reality TV than it is survival of anything else. But just, I grew up in the outdoors. And again, like to go back to the John Muir question, just, seeing where somebody had an impact in that capacity and how it formed them, I feel similar, that connection to nature and the outdoors in the Great Lakes region. So the more time that I can spend, the more time that I can promote conservation and respect and, the beauty. And honestly, I'm somebody who's been heavy set their whole life. And so, there's the whole body positivity and mental health and things that go into being out in nature. And it helps me with, anxiety and things like that, and just feeling welcome and, in some capacity, encouraging others to get out there as well, too, because it is for everyone. It belongs to all of us, and we can do it in a respectful way and learn new skills. And I think the more we learn about things like bushcraft and just foraging and kind of that natural connection, and others learn, it'll just build that culture of conservation. So everything I do, if you decide to follow me along, it's in hopes that it inspires you to do it as well. And maybe I'll catch you in Michigan on the trails next year. That'd be fantastic.
Definitely. It's on my bucket list, Anthony, to make it out there. I think for the fall season, just because the fall colors. Yeah. Now, throughout all your experiences, kayaking, boating, hiking, have you had any close calls, whether Mother Nature caught you by surprise, maybe it was an unexpected wildlife encounter, or just some trouble on the trail?
I've never seen a bear, but I know that they're in the area. But interestingly, and this is just to show that this can happen anywhere. So I was hiking in Proud Lake State Park last week, actually, and it's outside Metro Detroit. And I was just following the trail signs and going along, but they weren't marked the distance. Some they can tell you how far you're going. And so you couldn't really gauge very well, it wasn't clearly marked, how far the distance was between one marker and the other. And so I'm sure there was a scale on there that I missed. My friends listening from Proud Lake, I'm sure there's something I missed. This is an Anthony issue. That's the story. You guys, nobody did anything wrong. I messed up, but I got lost. And I remember I was hiking, and the trail got really narrow, and it got a little rougher terrain. And I was thinking to myself, it went from being very wide and groomed down to being a lot more narrow and rustic. And I thought, I think I'm lost right now. And it was starting to rain. And I was like, I don't know where I'm at, and if I took a wrong turn, because this feels like it should have been a shorter distance. And I think maybe this is more of like a mountain biking section than a hiking section. And this is just in a state park where the loop was maybe a few miles, right? And so I was like, well, I'm going to keep going and I'll figure this out. And I was like, how much water do I have? Where am I at? Like, not like a sense of danger, but just kind of like a sense of like anxiety came over me. And then eventually I found the trail marker, and I was like, oh, that was in my head. I was like, that was a lot further than I was expecting. It goes to show that in a smaller area, you can still get lost. You can still find yourself not quite knowing. And so I think just those principles of, having the right map on you, or just planning your route ahead of time, or, my phone wasn't really working very well in this space. So I couldn't really pull up AllTrails. Like maybe if I'd gone on AllTrails or another app similar ahead of time, or having the right, like watch that can give you all that data. Even if you're somebody like me who's grown up a lot of time in the outdoors, done all these things, very confident, to feel that way at just a state park that's a few mile loop, and it's just one of those things where it's like, that's how important those principles of planning ahead are, knowing where you're at, making sure you have the right water, making sure. And I was like, what if I get hurt out here? Like I could roll my ankle on this rock and I don't really have service and I don't exactly know 100% where I'm at. So it's even the best of us, wherever you're at, just the pre-planning is important. And sometimes that humbling reminder is what's needed. So that's something that just happened to me recently that I wanted to share.
Appreciate you sharing that, Anthony. Now, that was it, Anthony, for the regular questions. This last portion of the podcast is the this or that questions. I'm going to be giving you 2 hiking-related topics, and you just choose which one you personally prefer, but they're all hiking-related. So the first one is, do you prefer ascending or descending?
I like going up. I like the challenge of going up. Coming down, it's it's a little bit harder on the knees. Feet kind of smashing in the front of your shoes if they're not laced right. I like heading up.
Do you prefer waterfalls or summits?
I would probably say waterfalls right now, just because we don't really have a lot of summits outside the dunes, but even up and down the dunes, you're still in the woods. So hiking to a waterfall is pretty fun.
And then another trail system question. Do you prefer switchbacks or just going straight up?
Take me straight up. I do enjoy a little bit of rock scrambling and a little bit of crawling, so I'll go straight up.
And then do you hike with trek poles or are you freehand?
I'm kind of a mix. I like one. So I like one walking stick. Yeah, just in the middle.
And this one is something that's been changing over the last couple of years. But when it comes to your footwear, Do you prefer trail runners or hiking boots?
I've only ever used hiking boots. I have not used trail runners, but I would like to check them out. So I can't really say I have a preference for either right now, but a good hiking boot, nice and wide with some arch support. I could go for a while with that.
And then another trail system question is, do you prefer a loop trail or an out and back trail?
I like a loop. So I like a change in scenery and topography and to take you in and around. Yeah, I like to look at new stuff the entire way if I can.
And then, especially in the summer month, when you do come across a body of water, either at the end of the trail or at the midway point, do you jump in or do you stay dry?
Gotta jump in. It's the best part.
Now, this one's another tough one, but when it comes to viewpoints, especially in the summer months or even in the fall, do you prefer sunsets or sunrises?
I am not a morning person at all, so I will always hike to a sunset. But tell me how the sunrise is. Take a picture and I'll look at it. I'm sure it's gorgeous.
And, one thing we didn't touch upon, but I know that the Great Lakes region is known for their spring wildflowers, but if you had to choose, would you choose spring wildflowers or the fall colors?
Oh, that is a tough one. I'll probably say fall colors. I do love tulips, especially in West Michigan. We have a big tulip festival. But with October being my second favorite month outside of July, go with the fall colors, definitely. Okay. And I like the spookiness of it, the eeriness. It's a lot of fun.
And then the last one, which is the most decisive, controversial one. When it comes to social media, do you tag a hike or do you not tag a hike?
I usually just tag Michigan, so that's where I'm at with it. Yeah, I would say that just Michigan in general. If I feel compelled to be very specific, I might. It depends on what I'm really looking at. But in all honesty, if you follow a lot of my social media, I'm just in the state. And if you want to know, you can shoot me a DM and I'll share it. But I think that kind of goes back to, it's like a lot of our natural landscape and places have had some challenges with the Instagram touch. And so I think that just by encouraging you to experience all of Michigan, you might find something gorgeous or you might find something I've never seen before either. So share that with me. Let's look at different stuff together.
Well, that was it, Anthony, for the this or that questions. For folks that are listening that want to follow your hiking adventures and learn more about Michigan and the Great Lakes region, where can they find you on social media? And then can you share your podcast one more time with us?
So on Instagram, you can find me at Anthony in Parks. And you can also follow my blog, anthonyinparks.com, where I talk a lot about parks and recreation, again, at the intersection of personal and professional. If you are interested in careers or the professional side of things of local, state, national parks and recreation, outdoor recreation, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. So Anthony Iraki, Iracki. But that's Anthony in Parks. And my podcast that I host with Tina Nowakowski is my co-host for that show. So that is Shore to Shore. And again, anywhere you stream your shows, you can find Shore to Shore.
Awesome, Anthony. And do you have a specific day that your episodes drop?
We are typically, when we're in season, we are bi-weekly on Wednesdays. So we're in the middle, but if this is going to go out in December, so we will be at the end of a season. But if you're going to listen to us in the spring, you can imagine probably late January through May, every other Wednesday.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And we'll be sure to add those all to the episode show notes so you can check out Anthony both on Instagram, his blog, and his Shore to Shore podcast. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us here on the podcast. It's been really great talking about Michigan and the Great Lakes region with you. Really appreciate it. And that brings us to the end of this episode alongside Anthony. We extend a heartfelt thanks to him for coming on the podcast. Make sure to stay connected and follow his upcoming adventures on Instagram at Anthony in Parks. Be sure to check out the episode show notes for links for Anthony's website and podcast. We have an incredible lineup of episodes planned throughout the fall, and we can't wait to share them with you. New episodes will be dropping every Monday with occasional bonus episodes on Fridays. To ensure you never miss out on those thrilling tales, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to join our vibrant community on Instagram at Hikes and Mikes. We'll be sharing episode visuals, my own personal hiking content, and so much more. Let's stay connected and continue to inspire each other on this remarkable journey. As we bid farewell, remember to tread those happy trails, embrace the great outdoors, and keep the spirit of adventure alive. Until next time, my fellow explorers, happy hiking. This episode's music was created by Ketsa. Follow him on Instagram at Ketsa Music. This episode is brought to you by Flip Socks. Whether you're on the trail, on the job, or in the yard, Flip Socks will keep Mother Nature out of your boots with their innovative nylon sleeve. You no longer need to worry about any annoying debris getting trapped in your boots during your hikes. Simply flip down the nylon sleeve over any boot to prevent Mother Nature from finding its way inside, keeping your feet comfortable all day long. To get your first pair, visit flipsockswithaz.com and enter promo code HikesMikes10 at checkout to receive 10% off your order. And for listeners who use the promo code at checkout, I'll be donating 100% of the Season 2 promo code proceeds to Big City Mountaineers, who provide transformative experiences through connections to nature that strengthen life skills and build community for youth and disinvested communities across the nation. So if you're tired of bits and pieces of the trail finding its way into your hiking boots, pick up a pair of Flip Socks today with the promo code HikesMikes10 to get 10% off. For website and promo code, see the episode description.